One of the central characters in Ursula K. Leguin's sixth Earthsea novel, The Other Wind, is Alder, a village sorcerer whose craft, whose skill, whose power is of mending. And this is going to be particularly important in a thematic way for him and for others, and indeed for the entire narrative universe of Earthsea. He has to make a sacrifice of his very power, the thing that gives him his identity, the meaning of his existence in many respects. And he goes through something kind of similar to what Ged the Archmage does in Tahanu, having to find his own way once his power is gone. He doesn't have quite so much time to do it because he's drawn into an incredibly important task in which he gets to, as he frames it, mend the world. And in the beginning of the work, we find out that he's having these dreams where he goes to the land of the dead, the dry land, and to the wall of stones. The first time he sees his wife, then he sees his old master, and then it's all the dead coming and wanting to touch him. And, he brings this up to the masters at Roke and to Ged, and people are trying to piece together what's actually happening with this. Ged sends him to Havnor, and this is one of the great crises. It's clear that something is wrong in the dry land and the relations between the dead and the living. There is a suggestion that it could be that Alder is able to go to the dry land and the stone wall precisely because of his great love for his wife, the love that they feel together, a love that is of two menders, which can't be broken because it's not in their nature to do breaking things. And this is when he's talking with Ged in chapter 1. Alder is talking about the various conjectures about how this came about, and Alder says, he said it was maybe my wife and I didn't know how to be parted, only how to be joined. That it was not my doing, but maybe ours together, because we drew to the other like drops of quicksilver. And there's, also perhaps the idea that, he can't actually break this thing that he's formed now. And so Alder is not a cause, but you could say a catalyst, along with his wife. And there's some interesting discussions there about the nature of love. Much later in the work, the wizard from Roke, Onyx, suggests to Alder that if he wants to have relief from these dreams, maybe he should go talk to the Pelnish wizard, Sepel, because Sepel is from this tradition that knows more about these things. So I'm just going to read this a little bit. Palm, the greatest island west of Havnor, had the reputation of being an uncanny place. Their lords had in ancient times refused fealty to the kings of Enlad and Havnor. Their wizards did not go to Roke for their training. The Pelnish lore, which called upon the old powers of the earth, was widely believed to be dangerous, if not sinister. Right? And then a little bit later, Onyx says, they know more than we do about these matters. Most of our art of summoning comes from the Pelnish lore. Thorian was a master of it. Misused, it has brought only harm, but it may be only our ignorance that led us to use it wrongly. It goes back to very ancient times. There may be knowledge in it we've lost. Sepel is a wise man and a mage. I think he should be with us, and he might help you if you can trust him. So they go and they visit Sepel. They talk for quite a while. And finally, Sepel says, would you accept the touch of the wizardry of Palm? And Alder says, we say on my island the man drowning doesn't ask what the rope cost. If you can keep me from that place even for a night, you'll have my heart's thanks. Little is that is worth in return for such a gift. And so then Sepel is engaging in a little bit of diagnostics there. And he says, okay, so This is going to cost you. What is the price that you're going to have to pay? Your power, your capacity for mending, your magic, your skill. And Alder says, all right, I'm only a mender. It's not a great power to give up. Sepple says, it's your living. And Alder says, it was my life once, but that's gone. And then Sepple says, well, maybe your gift will come back to you when what must happen has happened. I can't promise that. I will try to restore what I can of what I take from you, but we're all walking in the night now on ground we don't know. So if I spare your dream at that price, will you thank me? And Alder says, I will. What's the little good of my gift against the great evil my ignorance could do? If you spare me the fear I live in now, the fear that I may do evil, I'll thank you to the end of my life. So Alder is not just giving up his power to purchase an end to dreams that are bothering him. He's beset by a fear. He thinks that he may be the conduit for something terrible that's about to happen to Earthsea. And he wants to forestall that. So he is willing to give up his power. And they engage in a ritual that invokes the powers of the earth at Aurun, a holy site that has been unfortunately defiled by the Havnorians, who are not particularly keen on that sort of thing. But the Pelnish wizard knows what to do, and they take away his power. After that, there's a very interesting description. On the one hand, like it says, he found himself treated and considered to be one of the wizards. He could do nothing about it, though it embarrassed him, lest Onyx and Sepple should think he was claiming equality with them. And it also troubled him because he was now not even a sorcerer. So on the one hand, he's got an elevated status, and he's sort of like, getting to talk shop and hang out with the master practitioners from Roke and from Palm. On the other hand, he doesn't have his power. And it's not just a loss of that power. Something else is going on. His gift was gone. He had no power at all. He knew it as surely as he would have known the loss of his sight, the paralysis of his hand. He could not have mended a broken pitcher now, unless with glue, and he would have done it badly because he had never had to do it. So there's that aspect. But then there's something more. Beyond the craft he had lost was something else, something larger than the craft that was gone. Its loss left him, as his wife's death had, in a blankness in which no joy, no new thing was or would ever be. Nothing could happen. Nothing could change. This is a great description of what it feels like to have lost more than you thought you were going to lose. And it recalls the loss of his wife, the one who loved him, who he loved, and who, had so much in common with him. They learned from each other. They practiced their art of mending together, and were about to have a family when she dies in childbirth. But going on, it says, not having known of this larger aspect of his gift till he lost it, he pondered on it, wondering about its nature. It was like knowing the way to go, he thought, like knowing the direction of a home. Not a thing one could identify or even say much about, but a connection on which everything else depended. That is what he gave up, in addition to the more manifest aspects of his craft. Without it, he was desolate. He was useless. And again, I think you can see a parallel here to Ged, who has lost his power, has given it up, also sacrificed it for the good of Earthsea in Tahanu, the fourth novel. It finishes with this, but at least he did no harm. So in a way, this was very successful. Now, at the very end of the work, they go to the wall of stones, and Alder says, we have to mend the world. We have to break the wall. And he's saying this to Hanu, and he says, maybe the others can help us. And so they go, and the others, figure in with them: the patterner, the summoner, the doorkeeper, Sepul, Gamble, Onyx, Lebanon. All of them gather around the wall, and they help to undo it. Tenar and Sessarak are left there while everybody else is out of their body, just as spirits at the wall. And Sessarak asks, well, what should we do, Tenar? And Tenar says, we're to keep the house. And what do? They actually do manage to pull the wall apart bit by bit and create a breach in it, which now opens up the dry land to the rest of Earthsea, and indeed to the rest of the land that it was carved out from on the other wind. So there's this great description here. I'm actually going to read two little passages. Tahanu came up beside him. Help me, he said. She put her hands on the stone, the human hand in the burnt clog, gripping it as well as she could, and gave a lifting tug. The stone moved a little and a little more. Push it, she said. Together they pushed it slowly out of place, grating hard on the rock beneath it till it fell on the far side of the wall with a heavy thump. The next stone was smaller. Together they could lift it up out of its place. They let it drop in the dust on the near side. A little bit later, Alder could scarcely move the great stone his hands were on, but the summoner was beside him, stooping with his shoulder against it, and said, now! Together they pushed it till it overbalanced and dropped with that same final heavy thump on the far side of the wall. Then there's a vast, soft cry among the shadows on the other side, like the sound of a sea on a hollow shore. Their darkness surged up against the wall, but Alder looked up and saw that it was no longer dark. Light moved in the sky where the stars had never moved, quick sparks of fire in the dark west. Kalessin, that was Tahanu's voice. He looked at her. She was gazing upward, westward. She had no eye for earth. And then we see that Tahanu turns back into the dragon that she's never been, but has always been the entire time. Fire ran along her hands, her arms, into her hair, into her face and body, flamed up into great wings above her head and lifted her into the air, a creature all fire, blazing, beautiful. Who else comes? Alder is there. He held in his hands, forgotten, a chinking stone he had wrenched from the wall to loosen a larger rock. He watched the dead go free. At last he saw her among them. He tossed the stone aside and then stepped forward. Lily has come. Lily, he said. She saw him and smiled and held her hand out to him. He took her hand, and they crossed together into the sunlight. This is the end of Alder, reunited now with his wife in death. The dead can finally pass on into whatever existence follows next, to be on the other wind or to rejoin the earth, whatever it might happen to be. Alder is made whole through his sacrifices, and his sacrifice of himself helps to mend the world, although definitely not on his own. This is a collaborative redemption that takes place.